and we will continue.
Guests also, they come from the west part of the United States, Atlanta, and from the east part of the United States, California. Their names are Foy Schieber and Mike D'Ambrosia. Their collaborative effort to share threat data in a vetted member community. This session will introduce the APWG and its clearinghouse approach to sharing electronic crime data. Their eCrime Exchange is a platform designed to provide threat data between the APWG member community. The ACX repository provides real-time information for blocking malicious URLs and other data via RESTful API to help protect the users and organizations from criminal and fraudulent entities. So I hope you enjoyed this afternoon with Foy and Mike. Please give a big applause to Foy Schieber and Mike D'Ambrosia. Hello. It's all yours.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to start out just to open and talk about who and what, a little bit of what APWG is, and the clicker. There we go. Push the other button. That worked. The Anti-Phishing Working Group was founded in 2003. Originally, we strictly focused on phishing. There was about 4 or 5 of us got together just to look at this new phenomenon that was taking over the industry we saw with the pH and phishing. And from there, we built together a collaborative group of interested parties. So our membership has grown now to include different financial institutions, ISPs, a lot of your technology companies, law enforcement agencies, including a lot of your research groups like universities, the different computer emergency response teams around the world. We work with those guys, different treaty organizations, just interested folks that are working in cybercrime specifically. Over the years, as we've been working, we've expanded. So as crime and fraud have evolved through the years, the Anti-Phishing Working Group has grown and evolved to cover other areas. So some of the areas we look at now is we get involved a lot in cyber policy. We work with ICANN, the EU government, the US government, Asian governments as well, to talk and advise on different aspects of fighting electronic crime. We do a lot of work in education and user awareness. We have a global program called Stop Think Connect that we use to help what I like to say is upgrade our users a little bit to make them more aware of the threats that are out there and how to work and operate safely on the internet. Over the years from the beginning, we also have been tracking trends. So we do quarterly reports and annual reports where we look at statistics and the phenomenons that are of malicious activity, the actors that are out there, what are they doing, what are the threats that we see coming down the road. We report those out. We've been doing that for 12, 13 years now, so you can see an evolution of what's going on out there in the electronic crime field. The 2 areas we're going to talk to mainly today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our research programs, and then Mike's going to get a little more into the threat data sharing and more the technology side of what we do. From a research side, and this is what I think will be interesting to a lot of the attendees here, is we run an annual program called our Symposium on Electronic Crime Research. This is a peer-reviewed process where we review the papers. The accepted papers are then published. We run 2 tracks. So the first track is for theoretical cybercrime academic research. So these are the actual, our students, our university people working on their PhDs, have some research they need to get published. If you want to get a PhD, you need to publish your papers. This is one of the things we focus on. And these papers are all revolving around electronic crime. To date, we've published over 120 papers through the IEEE. As well, those papers that we accept, we then fly one author from each paper into our annual event. Our next event will be in San Diego next May. And so they get to present their work to the industry. In this process, you get introduced to a lot of organizations like Microsoft, Google, Symantec, IBM, blah, 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 all the big security companies in the industry, and quite a few people end up getting employment through it. So I highly encourage you, if you're working on some research, that you get your papers in. We also run a second track for industry. One of the things we found, there's not a lot of facility if you're working in industry and you're doing some research. We try to help you get those papers published as well. If you're working in industry and you publish your paper, we kind of expect you to pay your own way to come to the event and present your work, since you do have a job and the students do not. And also we do offer a cash award for the 2 best papers each year. So a little money in your pocket never hurts, right? On the side of that, we also have a European foundation that we set up in 2013. Now, the European Foundation does its own research and awareness projects, and those are currently running, primarily funded through the Horizon 2020 programs. And in that program, we've got 3 going on right now. The VVET program is creating educational materials for vocational studies to help students. The TruSec is creating a program through the EU for a security seal. So educational programs and different organizations that are working in cyber can get a kind of like what we would call in the States a good housekeeping seal of approval. I don't know if we have a similar program in the EU like that, but just a program to evaluate and say these programs are valid, you should look into them, good education process. And then we're also developing through the EU Foundation a cyber volunteer network. So this will be a program, basically you'll have apps that you could install, and users or our cyber volunteers will have the opportunity to get certified and become part of the network. So let's say I'm a teacher, and I want to help educate my students. I could use this network to help schedule and find someone to come in and talk to my students and help raise their awareness again. So just some programs we've got going on there to raise the awareness throughout Europe, specifically focused within the European Union. Beyond that, now to get to more of the technical side, Mike's going to talk to you a little bit about the APWG Z-Crime Exchange and our data sharing program.
Which button?
The one on the right.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike D'Ambrosia, and as Foy was saying, I am the technical guy. And what I'm going to show you today is just a real brief. We've only got a limited amount of time. There's quite a bit of depth to this, but what I'm going to do is just give you some surface-level information on how we share data and what our experience has been. As Foy was talking about the programs earlier, the ECX, the E-Crime Exchange, which we refer to as the ECX, is a free service for APWG members, so there's no additional cost to be able to use the data sharing side of the APWG. So the mission for what we're trying to accomplish here is just to be a best-in-class data sharing framework. We're a high-performance framework. Things happen quickly. We're trying to limit the access into the system to people that we know are known good actors. We handle sharing of really any type of threat data, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the workgroup features. And we make data available nearly instantly to everybody that comes in. We turn it around fast. We bring it in, scrub it up, get it right back out and back into use so that people can use it to protect the public, or for your research or academic or whatever it is that you're doing with it. One of the big goals is we want to try and drive data towards users, and we use an alerting system. When data comes into the system, we scan it, we look for matches, for patterns where people have said, hey, show me when a TLD comes in that I'm interested in. We can send you an email alert and get that information out to you right away. And one of the big things is I don't know how many of you out here are already using existing threat platforms and toolkits, but what we didn't want to do was create yet another platform that you had to log into, scan the data that way. What we wanted to do is give you a robust API behind the scenes. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And finally, we've been doing this for a while. As Foy mentioned, me? Sorry about that.
Everybody's awake?
So this started back in 2003. Just a brief history. Our chairman, Dave Jevons, went to an industry dinner in San Francisco where he met with some other banking people. Everybody over the dinner was complaining about the fact that they were all facing the same threats, but they were not talking to each other about what was going on. And so the idea spawned at that point in time, let's share data of all these banking entities. Some large banking entities in the States, along with some emerging electronic banking, such as PayPal, were all there in attendance. Dave went home in his living room, basically, crafted up a system of servers and networks. Emails started coming in from all the banks. We collated all that information and then started distributing it back out. Kind of similar to what the Palo Alto Network guy was talking about. If you saw that presentation where they share data with Symantec and some of their other competitors, these banks as well were sharing data amongst themselves. It was an email-based system. It didn't scale very well at the time, but it was a very small sharing group. And so that lives on until today. There we go. So ECX is built into two sides. There's the web interface where you can come in and enroll, take a look at data. It's a very sort of thin interface. And then the real power behind the scenes is the API. We use a REST API. A gentleman before us that was speaking was talking about the REST API that comes with Azure. We do a similar sort of thing as well. Exposing some of the technology that we've got, that we've built on, we use a Lambda-style LAMP stack, and what Lambda means, or is in use these days, is that you have hot data and warm data. So we have data that we make available instantly, and then we have data that we curate from behind the scenes, metadata, and then we bring that in. That takes a little while longer. Eventually, everything syncs up. So we use PHP. We're a PHP shop. We do behind-the-scenes messaging, where we send messages out for jobs to spawn and go out and find additional data. We use RabbitMQ for that. MySQL is used. This is the repository of truth. That's where we keep all of our data in, but it's heavily indexed and elastic. We use Logstash, Kibana. We track files that we have on the system through FileBeats. And we use an alerting system called ElastAlert, which is done by Yelp. We've added that in as well. And then we have a legacy indexing system, Sphinx Search, that we're trying to get rid of. Memcache helps us with speed, and then we're very distributed because we run on AWS, and that helps us be able to deploy new instances quickly and be able to respond to additional workload that comes up. So quickly, on side one, we said that there were two sides to this. On side one, the web user interface, we store data and we make it visible in either modules or work groups. And the difference is that modules are data that we gather, curate, bring into the system, normalize, and we're responsible for that. Work groups allow users to be able to come in, create their own data schema, basically hold any sort of data that you've got out there. You create the schema, sort of think of it as Excel, where you name each column, whatever it is you want to put in that column. We do a similar sort of thing. We allow you to create ad hoc sharing groups so you can bring your data in and store it within that and then figure out who you want to share it with. Inside the web interface, we provide a little bit of filtering. I'll show you some examples of that and some screenshots that we've got. And it just gives you an easy way just to go in and kind of do some ad hoc searching so you can kind of see what's going on with the data that you're interested in. It is a closed community, as I've said. You must be an APWG member to use it, and this allows us to know that people that we're sharing data with are vetted. So that takes the original concept of those original banks and extends it out maybe another layer. So what we don't want to do is provide it all to the public, because then we don't have real control over the data. We don't know where it's coming in from. This way, we know who's who. I mentioned that we've got data that gets driven out with the alerts. We provide all sorts of API documentation. We use a documentation tool built for APIs called Swagger. And in GitHub, there are a ton of tools to be able to work with Swagger docs, where you can build clients and change your documentation around as far as the presentation style goes. Lots of stuff you can do with it. It's very flexible. And so the concept that we've got here is that things are really complex back behind the scenes, but using this web interface, it kind of keeps things simple for you. So this is really where the meat of the matter lies, which is with the high-performance REST API. Everybody used an API before? Some, good. We use basically two main operations: a GET, which gathers the data out, where you put in a command, it returns data back to you. A POST is where you send us data, A patch is where you would change data, and options just, it's a way that the API tells you what's available as far as services go. We use one interface for the entire ECX application just to make it simple and easy, and then we use different endpoints to represent different buckets of data. So we keep all of the fish data in one bucket that's represented by the fish endpoint. We have a malicious IP, which contains scanners, botnet activity, login attempts, and that comes from PayPal. It's the only place where that data comes from, or we're the only people that end up having that data. We do user validation through a token, and we have a pretty robust set of query parameters to allow you to be able to dig in, find the data that you're really interested in, and dig it back out quickly. We allow you to paginate through the data so that the result set actually shows you you're on page 1 of 50-odd pages, and then it gives you the links to be able to surf through the next couple of pages. So you have complete control over the result set with that. Fast. That's the big thing. We wanted something that scaled really well, where we could continue to add more and more users as the APWG grows. So we can return, we take your query in, we parse it out, we figure out what data you want, we gather the data, we put it in together in a packet, and we send it back out to you, and that happens in under 200 milliseconds. We provide a testing sandbox for you, so you can come in and play around a little bit with it. We pick up the last, I don't know, maybe 4 hours of live production data, so you've actually got some real data to work with and kind of test your queries against. And then, I should have started with this to begin with. If you want to take a look at the way that we output the data, the URL at the bottom of the screen here is a zip file I put together last night that shows the output. Here, I'll move out of the way so those of you with cameras can take a look. So the zip file contains a cut of the phish endpoint, the malicious IP endpoint, and we have a sort of a honeypot of email. If you're interested in email analysis and looking for trends in email scams and phishing, we have a honeypot that we bring in at reportphishing@apwg.org. All those emails go in. They're also available through the API. I'll show you that in the web interface as well. So sending us data is easy, really easy. We take 4 fields. That's it. The date that whatever information you're sending us is in the way of phish is first seen, the brand that the phish is trying to attack, the URL of the phish, and a confidence as to how confident you are that this is actually phish. And we use three consistent values. 100% means that you've seen this with your own eyes, that you know for sure that this is a phish. And 90 is that this is a machine process has identified this as phish, and you're sending it to us that way. 50, I don't know, could be, maybe not. And we've used the same format since the original days of 2003 when this was put together within that banking dinner. We validate the data, we accept it, we normalize it, we turn it back around, and the insert happens in less than 75 milliseconds. So again, we're really interested in speed here and tuning. And then we have a complete set of robust result codes so that when you perform your operation, the API tells you through these result codes, was it successful? Was there an error? If so, what was the error, to help you programmatically put your scripts together. So I'm going to run through a couple of screenshots of the application. This is the web interface. And so what you see here, this is the main page when you log in, so you get a little graphing and charting that kind of gives you the general state of the nation as we see it. And then, as I mentioned, we have full documentation for the API. So up on the top there, you see you've got your API key, you've got the base URL to get to the API, and then you've got down below, if you scroll the screen down, you'd see all the documentation for each module that's within here. One of the cool things about Swagger, as I mentioned, using that as a documentation platform, is it'll auto-generate API clients for you. So if you work in Go, you work in Python, you work in Java, all of those using the Swagger documentation, you can fast track and build a base API client that you can then extend out. So what we try and do is get you going really quickly through this. And inside of that auto-generated in the green circle there are a series of about 7 different clients that are available for you to download right away. So going quickly through the modules, you can see right there that we've got the phish, the malicious IP, which is the PayPal feed, and then the report phishing, which is the emails. Those are all located under modules. This is data that we support, maintain. And then you've got, in parentheses, you've got the endpoint that you would use in order to get through that data through the API. This is an example screen showing the phishing data. It's hard to see from right here. So date discovered, the brand, the confidence level, and the URL, those are the 4 fields that we've got right there. The status indicates whether or not the phish is still active or if it's been knocked down and taken care of, if it's still a threat or not. And then you can edit the information from inside of here using the blue button on the far right-hand side. One of the nice things about using this data table presentation here is we've got column filtering at the very bottom of the data table. So you can put in whatever you want in there. You want to put in a substring for, you're only looking for URLs that have a particular string in them. You can put that in the bottom there. The data table will filter that down and only show you those results. So in the next slide, you're going to see I've taken the very last entry on the list there with the maslog.club URL and filtered it down to just that. We found 1 result in the system. And so it's a quick way to kind of get a handle visually on what's going on within the data that you might be interested in. This is the malicious IP data. This is a series of, as I said, scanners, bots, login attacks, and so on. It shows the IP where this information was generated from, and PayPal sends this to us. We get a good feed in here. We've got about 10 million entries in this data set. And this is the report phishing data set. Again, all of the interface through each of the modules here uses the same data table. So you've got the same pagination, column filtering, ability to take a look at the data, scroll up and down, and change your result sets. In addition with this one's kind of interesting because on the right-hand side here, we actually show you the source that's inside of the email. So what I've done here is I've clicked on the show button for the headers. And for those of you interested in email information, you can see the header information right here already. So then you can set up your queries in the API and begin to bring this out. Workgroups is a real powerful feature that we like. It's deep, it's kind of technical. I'm not going to get into it today, but the overarching concept is you can set up your own container that holds your specific type of data. You can store basically any sort of data in there. And using the same API that we use for our modules, you can use that for your data and then figure out who you want to share that with. Same, you can add and take data out of that repository, and then you have member control over who has access to it. So these are the first ones that we've got in here right now. We've got a Bitcoin data exchange with a bunch of Bitcoin information, a little bit of ransomware-oriented type stuff in there. The IRS is the United States taxing entity, authority. There are people calling around right now saying, you owe the IRS money, send us a gift card with a payment at this address. We track SMS phish and then malicious domains. And then finally, this is the alerts section would be located in here. I've talked briefly about it, where when data comes into the system checks it in real time, looks for a pattern match that you've set up already, a particular domain name, a TLD, a brand. If there's a match made there, it'll send you an email. We also hook into Slack channels for those of you that use Slack. And then this is just your standard profile. Demographic information, phone, change password, and so on. So, since this is sort of a research and learning conference, I wanted to kind of just finish up here with some best practices that we see. First of all, a lot of people don't read the documentation. We've got a really robust set of documentation available for you. Spend some time, read it, figure out what the options are. We get our logs messed up bad with people trying to figure it out on the fly. An API is designed to be beat on. Use it a lot. We like to see people making requests about 1 per second or so. In the past, we've had people that only make a request 1 time per day, and that's 24 hours or 23 hours and 59 minutes of exposure where there's data available to you that you could be using in there. So work with the API, query it a lot. In order to do that, you're going to want to keep track of the last time that you queried. We have a highest ID parameter that comes back, so you can say, this is the last ID that I got, give me everything from that point forward. And you can do the same thing with the date modified. And then know your data set. Use the UI, use the web front end in order to be able to poke around in there and figure out the data that you're interested in. What would that pattern be? How would I query that inside of the API? What would I be looking for? And as we all know, bad actors change up their game often in order to be able to maintain their attacks and be effective is a good word. So what you're going to be looking for is going to change over time. So as those threats begin to get knocked down, the bad actors are going to change the way they do business. They're going to come back in with new threats. So you need to go back in and check every once in a while to make sure that what you actually think you're looking for is actually in the data set and that they haven't changed up. And so this is real quickly how to run an API. So the very top entry would return all the fish that we have on file as of right now, working in descending order. The next one, you can specify fields. So if there's fields, I know in the EU there's some sensitivity around information. Some of the stuff you don't want to have in your possession. You can figure out using the fields parameter which fields you want to get back so you can avoid the things that you might not want to get. You can look for specific brands, and then you can do wildcard searches. So I threw this search actually in there last night with the Malaga wildcard just to see, and I found 75 entries in our data set for it. And then you can mix and match wildcards, query parameters within that, so you can run multiple query parameters at the same time. So the other thing I thought I'd share with you are what are the obstacles and problems that we've got with data sharing. Data sharing should be important, right? The more data we share, the more effective we are as an industry. So I broke it down into 3 sections: technology, legal, and business. And within the technology section, and this one really surprises me, we use a REST API. We've got feedback that people find it difficult for some reason. This is technology that's been around for over 12, almost 13 years. And it's very well established, yet people in this industry don't seem to use it very easily. We get a little bit of pushback on it. So it started originally with Flickr and Facebook and Twitter back in 2002, 2003. Those were the first releases of REST APIs. The other problem that we see is when we start training people up, we get high industry turnover. As everybody's mentioned this morning, if you sat in on some of the other presentations, that there's a real need for engineers in this space right now battling cybercrime. And so people, when they come in, they tend to move along and they move up and they get promoted and they move around a lot. So the person we trained today could be gone next week. Someone new comes in to take the place. They're not very well trained, so we need to continue to train people constantly. Yeah, this is an interesting one. And one that kind of surprises us, at least in the States, is that we're not seeing a lot of people coming into a job knowing how to use APIs and technology like this. And that kind of surprising. We see people just wanting to, can't you just send me by email a CSV file that's got all the data in it? And it's like, no, this is a much better way to go about doing things. And then we still see a lot of people wanting to use that email CSV file sharing standard. And it just doesn't work. It's riddled with latency. This is a much better solution. From the legal side, and this is facetious, obviously, the first thing to do is we're going to kill all the lawyers. There is quite a bit of uncertainty in the legal community right now around how to share data, what data is available to share, do I want to share data, is it a good thing to share data, what's our exposure for sharing data. If, say, for instance, a domain name has an IP address in the domain name, is that personal information? Can that be shared? I don't know, talk to 5 lawyers, you're going to get 6 different opinions. And then on the business side, companies are understaffed right now. That's the whole reason why this conference exists, in a sense, is to get people into the industry. And so we've got processes that were established a long time ago in order to be able to get data in and out of systems, and they're very reluctant to be able to go in and change these things because they don't have the staff to, one, make the change, monitor the changes, release the changes, and then take care of it afterwards. So companies and businesses are somewhat reluctant to be adding new changes to their existing business processes. In the States, we have a small animal, about the size of a squirrel maybe, lives underground, and it pops out every once in a while. It comes up out of its burrow and pops up and looks around, and then it grabs whatever nuts and then right back down into its hole. And I use this term to describe some of the action that we see from companies that are just interested in consuming the data. Companies will pop up, they'll grab all the data, and then they'll go back down in their hole, and we don't really see them again for a while. What we're interested in having is people sharing data, and the prairie dogging doesn't help us move in that direction. And a lot of companies don't know that they can share data with us, or that they should be sharing data with us, or why it is that that's a good thing to be able to do. And as I mentioned, a lot of companies are understaffed right now. There's just not a lot of development cycles in order to be able to building tools. You're up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Just in closing, to cover a couple of quick points on how to get involved with APWG. So there's generally two main areas here when we look at our researchers and the universities. So as a university researcher, you want to get your stuff published, we can help you do that. Like I said, we do publish these papers through the IEEE. There's very few places that you really want to get published as a researcher, but that's one of them. And we do offer special membership for research organizations. So APWG is a nonprofit organization. Everything we get goes back into the community. And that's where we maintain a membership program. So all of our corporate entities, we ask them to pay an annual membership fee. We use that money to keep the lights on, keep the systems up and running, keep our developers paid. Although we try to think of ourselves as we're doing the good fight, we still have to pay our bills. So we kind of depend on those groups to keep that money coming in. We get some grant money through the EU and some other organizations, but it's a small portion of what it takes to keep the organization as a whole up and running. Generally, as a university, if you want to get access, you just need to submit a short abstract on what type of research you're doing, what other researchers are you working with, and what corporate entities you may be working with. And then we do have a data sharing agreement. Everybody signs the same agreement. For the corporation side, we do have different levels depending on what kind of data, how you want to work with the system. The sponsoring level is for full access. Then we have other levels, like a lot of the banking institutions and some of the other entities. They don't necessarily want the data. They're already working with somebody that has access. They just want to help keep the group running. So we have a lower level for them to join. And we have an introductory, if you're an organization and you want to play with the data a little bit to see, is this something I can use? Is it going to help my company? We do a 10-day trial so you can sign up and get access and get in there and play around a little bit. The emails are right there for me, Mike, and support. If you have questions about the e-crime exchange itself, drop us a note. We'll get you involved and see how we can work together. And like I say, our ultimate goal is to try to make it a safer place out there and see how we can get this threat data and help our researchers to get out there and hopefully save people from losing their money in the end of the day. And I think that's got it for us. If there's any questions, we're here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We're running out of time.
No problem, I understand.